You know exactly what it means when you see it. One finger, extended upward, no words required. It crosses every language barrier on Earth. A driver cuts you off in Tokyo, in Rome, in São Paulo. The response is the same gesture everywhere. You have seen it, you have probably used it, and you have never once stopped to ask why that specific finger means what it means. The answer most people give involves English archers and a famous battle in France. That story is almost certainly wrong. The real history is older, stranger, and goes back 2,000 years before that battle ever happened. Start with the story you have probably heard. The year is 1415, the Battle of Agincourt. English forces under Henry V face a vastly larger French army in northern France. The longbowmen are the most feared archers in the world at this point. Their weapon, the English longbow, requires years of training to master and extraordinary physical strength to draw. The repeated strain of pulling a bow with that force, thousands of times over a lifetime, actually deforms the archer's body. Their left arm and the index and middle fingers of the right hand develop differently from the rest. The story goes like this. Before the battle, the French allegedly threatened that when they captured the English archers, they would cut off those two drawing fingers, the index and the middle, to prevent them from ever firing a bow again. When the English won, the archers supposedly held up those two fingers at the retreating French as a taunt. We still have our fingers. You failed. It is a compelling story. It has been repeated in books, documentaries, classrooms, and pub conversations for decades. There is just one problem. There is no historical evidence that it happened. Not a single contemporary account of the Battle of Agincourt mentions it. No French chronicle, no English chronicle, no letter, no record. Historians have searched. The story appears to have been invented sometime in the 20th century and spread because it was too satisfying not to repeat. The two-finger gesture itself, the V sign with the palm facing inward, does have some historical usage as an insult in Britain. However, it is a different gesture from the single raised middle finger. They are not the same thing, and they do not share the same origin. The actual history of the middle finger as an obscene gesture begins in ancient Greece, roughly 500 years before the birth of Christ. The philosopher Diogenes of Sinope, one of the founders of Cynicism and possibly the most deliberately provocative thinker in the ancient world, is recorded as having extended his middle finger at the orator Demosthenes in Athens. The gesture was understood by everyone present. It was not a new invention. It was already an established insult with a recognized meaning. The fact that Diogenes used it as a philosophical provocation, deliberately crude, deliberately contemptuous, suggests it was already common enough that the audience knew exactly what they were looking at. The ancient Greeks called it katapugon. It referred to a specific sexual act and used the shape of the extended middle finger as a visual reference. The insult was explicit and anatomical. There was nothing subtle about what it meant or what it implied about the person it was directed at. The Romans took it further and gave it a name that survived in historical texts. They called it digitus impudicus, the shameless finger, the indecent finger. It appears in the writings of multiple Roman authors. The poet Martial used it. The biographer Suetonius recorded that the Emperor Augustus once rebuked a crowd that had greeted him with it. The Roman writer Persius described someone offering it as an insult. Digitus impudicus appears in enough independent Roman sources that historians can say with confidence. This was not an obscure gesture. It was widely understood, and it was offensive in a way that let someone insult another person without saying a word. The Romans also had a use for the middle finger that was not insulting at all. They called it digitus medius in non-offensive contexts and used it in medical practice. Roman physicians would examine patients using the middle finger because it was considered the most sensitive finger for detecting subtle physical changes. The same finger that served as the ultimate insult in the street served as a diagnostic tool in the clinic. So why the middle finger specifically? Why not the index finger? Which points? Why not the little finger? Why did this particular finger end up carrying this particular meaning across 2,500 years of human history? The most straightforward explanation connects to the anatomy of the hand. When you make a fist, the middle finger is the longest. When extended alone, it projects furthest, most visibly, most unmistakably. From a distance, in a crowd, in the chaos of a street argument or a battlefield, the middle finger reads clearly in a way that other fingers do not. The gesture communicates at range without requiring words or proximity. There is also the phallic symbolism that the Greeks and Romans made explicit. An extended finger pointing upward was a visual reference that required no explanation in cultures where that imagery appeared everywhere, in art, in architecture, in religious symbols. The middle finger, the longest and most prominent, carried that association more clearly than any other. The gesture survived the fall of Rome, the Middle Ages, and the Renaissance, and arrived in the modern world completely intact. It began appearing in American culture in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. One of the earliest documented American uses was a baseball pitcher photographed, giving it to a rival team in 1886. It carried 2,000 years of accumulated meaning without anyone involved knowing the full history. The first time it appeared on film was 1927. Charlie Chaplin used it in a brief scene. The audience knew immediately what it meant. No explanation was needed, no subtitle, no context. That is what 2,500 years of consistent cultural transmission looks like. A gesture so old that Diogenes used it to insult a philosopher in ancient Athens is still being used today in traffic, in arguments, in photographs, in films, in every country that has absorbed any trace of Western culture. The Battle of Agincourt had nothing to do with it. The archers and their fingers are a good story, but the real origin is older, cruder, and considerably more Greek. If you didn't know this, drop it in the comments. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Hit like if it was worth your time.